All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
It's great to be back.
Now, we always try to bring you the most fascinating stories from history, and today we're tackling one that I think has captured pretty much everyone's imagination at some point.
Yeah, who doesn't love a good Viking tale, right?
Exactly. And to guide our deep dive today, we're checking out a YouTube video from Nutshell Do called The Vikings in a Nutshell.
Catchy title.
Right. I figured it'd be the perfect starting point to really unpack, the truth behind the legend.
Sounds good to me.
So let's get right into it. The video starts by setting the scene, the classic image of Vikings as these fierce warriors raiding and pillaging their way across Europe.
Right, horn, helmets, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly, but then it kind of throws us a curveball because it makes it clear that the Vikings were so much more than just raiders. I mean, they were also incredible shipbuilders, skilled traders, and even settlers.
It's true, they were like the ultimate multitaskers of the ancient world.
I loved it, the ultimate multitaskers. So tell me more about that. What made them such successful seafarers and traders?
Well, first of all, you've got to talk about those longships.
Oh yeah, those ships were incredible.
They were technological marvels for their time. They were designed with a shallow draft, which meant they could navigate rivers and coastlines with ease. They could even be carried over land for short distances, which gave them a huge tactical advantage.
Really? They carried those massive ships over land?
Yep. Apparently, they'd use rollers and manpower to haul them across relatively short stretches of land. It allowed them to bypass defenses or surprise their enemies. It's pretty amazing when you think about the logistics involved.
That's mind-blowing. I mean, just picturing a bunch of Vikings dragging a long ship across a field, it's kind of hilarious, but also super impressive. The video also mentions some of the famous Viking leaders with some pretty unique names, to say the least.
Oh yeah, those names are legendary. Like, who could forget Sigurd Snake in the Eye or Swen Forkbeard?
Or my personal favorite, Ragnar Harry Breeks. I mean, come on, that's a name that's going to stick with you.
They definitely knew how to make an impression. So what did you think about that whole naming system?
I mean, it seems a bit over the top, right? Like, did they just come up with these crazy nicknames for everyone?
Well, it wasn't quite that simple. Those names usually had a meaning behind them. Sometimes they reflected a person's physical appearance, like Harold Bluetooth. Maybe he had a bad tooth or something.
Or a fondness for early wireless technology.
Possibly. But other times the names were earned through deeds of valor, or they might even reference a person's lineage. So it was a way of telling a story about who that person was or where they came from.
So like a built-in resume in a way?
Exactly. Now, another thing the video highlights is the religious aspect of Viking society. They were pagans, which obviously put them at odds with Christian Europe.
And I imagine that led to quite a bit of conflict, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Vikings often targeted monasteries, which were seen as both centers of wealth and symbols of the Christian faith. It was a huge factor in shaping the dynamics between the Vikings and the rest of Europe.
It's interesting to think about how religion played such a central role in shaping those interactions and conflicts. Now, speaking of interactions, the Vikings weren't just raiding and pillaging, they were also establishing settlements all over the place.
They were incredible explorers and colonizers. They settled in Iceland, Greenland, parts of North America, and even Russia.
And they did all that 500 years before Columbus. That's just incredible. What do you think drove them to explore and settle in such far-flung places?
I think it was a combination of factors. There was definitely a sense of adventure, a desire to seek out new lands and opportunities, but there are also practical considerations like overpopulation or the search for better resources, and of course there was always the lure of wealth and power.
Makes sense. And it's amazing how they managed to adapt to such different environments, from the icy landscapes of Greenland to the vast plains of North America.
They were remarkably resilient and adaptable, which is another reason why their story continues to fascinate us today.
No doubt. So we've covered a lot of ground here. What are some of the key takeaways you think are important for understanding the Vikings?
Well, I think the biggest one is that they were so much more than just brutal raiders. They were complex and multifaceted people with a rich culture, a strong sense of community, and a thirst for adventure.
It's like we shattered that one-dimensional stereotype, right?
Exactly. They were explorers, traders, settlers, and yes, even fearsome warriors. But they were also poets, storytellers, craftspeople, and family members.
They were a whole society, not just a caricature.
Precisely. And I think it's important to remember that whenever we look back at any historical group or culture, we need to be careful not to oversimplify their story or reduce them to just a few defining characteristics.
Couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Vikings, what's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, the video we watched talks about how the Vikings have been portrayed in popular culture as both savage barbarians and romanticized noble savages. It's a really interesting duality, and it makes you wonder how much of that perception is based on reality and how much is shaped by our own biases and
It's
preconceptions.
like we're still trying to figure out who they really were centuries later.
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty of history. It's an ongoing conversation, a constant process of discovery and reinterpretation. And that's something we should always keep in mind as we explore the past and try to understand the people and events that shaped our world today.
Beautifully said. Well, on that note, I want to thank you for joining me on this Viking voyage.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those deep dives going. We'll see you next time.
Until then.